Christmas. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba, happy Christmas. Woohoo!
Greetings, holiday shoppers. There are now
91
shopping days left until Christmas, and I think you know what that means. That means this must be a Christmas Creeps Stocking Stuffer edition. Hi, my name is Joseph Wade. I'll be your host for this evening. Here with me tonight is my co-host, Mr. Bradford.
Hello. Greetings.
Brad, what's going on?
I just watched a good cartoon with you.
We certainly did. This episode, we're talking about the Adventure Time Christmas episode. Are there multiple Adventure Time Christmas episodes? Is this the first one or only one or what?
I want to say it's the only one. We should have checked.
Well, Brad is our resident Adventure Time expert, so I'm going to defer to him on all things in the Land of Ooo.
I want to say it's the only one. I have not seen, full disclosure, I have not seen all of Adventure Time yet. I've recently started getting back into it because the series just ended. I got as far as, I believe I watched Islands, which was a mini series. And then I think there was another season or two, and then another mini series Elements, and then I believe the series ended a little bit after that. It just ended, I think, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, as of this recording,
yeah, been on for almost 10 years. Interestingly enough.
It's so strange. Like I can remember like 10 years ago showing my friends the like Adventure Time pilot, the little pilot short that they put out on Nickelodeon.
Yes. Yep.
And being absolutely just enamored with it, and then finding out that it actually made it to series and they were putting it on TV and being so excited, watching it for a few years and loving it, and then just kind of falling off like you do. It happens.
Yeah, it does happen. It happened with me as well. I'd kind of fallen off before Islands came out, and then I watched Islands, and that was really good. But yeah, I do remember watching the pilot when it came out, when it was just like an experimental short, and loving it. And then I think there was like a year and a half, and then I realized, or I'd heard that it had actually become a series, and that was some good news, because Adventure Time, for the uninitiated, Adventure Time is the first sort of modern cartoon in sort of what some people are considering a golden age of cartoons, with sort of a narrative arc and a deeper sort of emotional tilt to them, I guess. Adventure Time, if it didn't start that trend, it definitely sort of set the momentum in that trend. And interestingly enough, this episode, or maybe another episode in this season, sort of start that rolling. Before this, Adventure Time had been just your sort of prototypical American cartoon where there's no continuity and no character development, so to speak, or not a lot. And that really kind of puts it on its side and really takes a look at these characters and starts to develop more of a world around them.
Right, like the first couple of seasons or so was very your typical kind of children's cartoon, had a very odd sense of humor that kind of set it apart from a lot of other cartoons, but
yes,
it's nothing revolutionary really. But then I think with this episode, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, but with this episode and then the future seasons, they really sort of build out the world and bring in sort of this meta narrative that sort of help the show really become kind of a bigger hit among older viewers.
Yes,
people our age, basically.
It was already a big hit because of the sense of humor, which we're not going to get into. If you haven't watched Adventure Time, I would recommend watching it. It's definitely in a league of its own. Highly recommended. I don't know. And it also launched the careers of a number of showrunners that run other shows right now, such as Steven Universe. Rebecca Sugar originally worked on Adventure Time, and that's kind of how she got her big break, was with these episodes that sort of have more of an emotional gut punch and also feature songs, which is a big part of Steven Universe. It's referenced in this episode, but the first episode that really does this, and like I said, I think it's earlier in the season, is an episode where Marceline is kind of coming to grips with her father and is singing about how her father has mistreated her in the past and dealing with that. So, anyways, enough about that. I think we can probably get into the plot synopsis really quick.
Sure.
I could probably blather on all day about this. So
this episode, real quick, is Holly Jolly Secrets, episodes 19 and 20 from season 3. It's, each of these episodes is a short, 15 minutes a piece, but together they kind of form one episode.
Yes.
So, Brad, lead us in here.
Okay. We should also mention before we move on that our previous stuffer, we watched Doug, which was also about secrets. It was called Doug's Secret Christmas. So this forms a bit of a mini series on cartoons with secrets in the title. But anyways, all right. So you have Finn and Jake. Finn's a magic dog. Jake's a human boy. They live in the magical land of Ooo, which is also, spoiler alert, post-apocalyptic Earth. Not really that much of a spoiler. And they're hanging out doing what they do, and Jake has found some tapes, some VHS tapes that Ice King, who is sort of the constant villain of the Adventure Time world, at least in Finn and Jake's sphere, had hid in a garbage dump in a pile of boogers. And so they recover these tapes, and Ice King called them evil while he was burying them, so they figure, there must be some secrets on these tapes. So they take them back to the treehouse. Jake posts posters around that they're having a secret viewing party where only Jake and Finn and their Game Boy friend BMO, who is the best character on the show, by the way, they're the only ones invited, but he posts posters. Ice King finds out about it and decides to crash the party, more or less, because he wants to watch the tapes. And Ice King is being Ice King, and he's being a little naive and silly and childish, and he doesn't know that these are his secret tapes. He just wants to watch tapes with Finn and Jake, but he comes to find out.
He just wants to hang out and be friends.
Yes, yeah.
It's kind of adorable and sad.
And that's kind of been a thing up to this point, is where Ice King is, yes, he kidnaps people, and that's not cool, but he's also just a very lonely man. And so you have a little sympathy for Ice King before this episode, but we'll come to that in a moment. So Ice King wants to hang out with Finn and Jake and wants to be friends, and obviously they think that he knows that these are his tapes, and so they keep trying to hide it from him. Ice King eventually finds out that the tapes are of him and starts becoming more proactive on getting into the house so he can take the tapes back and beat up Finn and Jake. So he creates a snowman army. There's some really good visual gags of him breaking in through a chimney and having to take off his clothes, and a snowman gets an apple on his nose, and it kind of plays around with the tropes of Christmas a little bit. It's cute.
Right, yeah.
There's not a whole lot. I mean, a lot of Adventure Time, a lot of the plots are very simple, but it really comes in through the jokes and the gags and all of that. So they're watching these tapes, and they're mostly of the Ice King doing a video diary and being the sad, lonely person that he is. And crying. There's a great, probably my favorite gag in the entire episode is just this elongated scene of the Ice King just bawling, and it has a little pop-up that comes out of the bottom like you would see on network television where it says, "You're watching the Adventure Time Christmas special," just so that anybody tuning in is certain of that. It's a great little joke. He eventually breaks in and gets to Finn and Jake, and they have a little bit of a battle. And there's one tape left, and they haven't found any secrets yet. But this tape is special because it's from before the Mushroom Wars, from before the apocalypse. And we see an antiquarian named Simon Petrikoff, who interestingly is also voiced by Tom Kenny. Go figure.
Interesting.
And he's detailing a crown that he found as part of his travels, and he puts on the crown as a joke with his wife, and he begins to change, and there's a change in him, and his wife no longer wants to see him. And so it's this video journal that kind of takes place over a number of weeks as his condition deteriorates, and he's becoming more and more, he looks like the Ice King, and he's able to summon snow, and he says, I'm losing my mind here, and I'm still inside, but I can't present like I used to. But, just know that whatever I do in this form, I don't mean it. It's not who I am. It's not a part of who I am. It's the crown and its influence over me. And it's really, begins to paint. It gives you a bit of the Ice King, aka Simon's backstory, but also begins to paint him as this empathetic figure, or this figure that you want to have empathy for. I mean, he doesn't have control over himself. He's a madman. He's been driven insane by this crown. And so Finn and Jake are wearing sweaters, Christmas sweaters. So is BMO. And so they roll it into their own little Christmas tradition. I believe the Ice King says, "We should do this every day. You're giving us, we're dressed up in silly clothes and giving each other presents." And he's like, "No, how about we do this once a year?"
Every day seems a bit much. How about just once a year? So, like, he hands them gifts. He gives them a tiny little tree that he cut down and a skunk wearing a scarf.
Skunk. Yes. And they give him the tapes. And so they establish that they sit around and drink hot cocoa and watch these tapes every year. And that is sort of their tradition. Nobody ever says Christmas during this. But, I mean,
right.
It's supposed to be, like, kind of cute and, the world has ended. There is no idea of Christmas. But they've kind of fallen backwards into creating Christmas because of the snow spells and the sweaters and everything else. And it's a cute touch. I like it a lot.
Right. It's kind of like, they don't know what, they don't have Christmas anymore. No one knows what Christmas is, but there's, like, this sort of, like, shared cultural, like, forgotten memory of, like, that we used to do this, and it just kind of all comes back around and coalesces, like, oh, we just have this now.
Yes.
And it's a lovely note to end the episode on.
Yeah.
Not nearly as much plot as that Doug episode that we watched.
No. And you kind of get what plot there is kind of dumped out in a minute-long video of Simon, and that's kind of all of the substantial plot. Finn and Jake actually don't have a lot going on in this episode, honestly. They're just kind of watching videos and trying to decode the secrets and joking around and being best buds like they are.
Right,
so.
But that's kind of what the whole show is like, there's not a lot of forward momentum in the plots, at least in the early going. It's just a lot of, cartoon silliness and maybe a couple of minutes of actual, like, plot to move things forward. But for the most part, it's just an excuse to have a cartoon and be silly, which is great. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that.
It is great. The animation's a lot of fun. If you haven't seen Adventure Time, do yourself a favor. If you have, like, Hulu or something like that, just go and start watching
the
it.
attention to detail in this show, I've always loved. Like, there's like details and then the little nooks and crannies of the animation, and just, like, jokes hidden where you wouldn't expect them.
Great visual gags.
Like the one shot against the back, you see against the back wall, it's like a table, and it's what I can only assume are just, like, a dozen other dead BMOs against the wall.
Yeah. So yeah, again, it's a show that kind of just takes joy in being silly and having adventures, as the name suggests. At least for now, it does begin to kind of evolve into its own sort of. It addresses a lot, but yeah, for now, it's very much kind of like an innocent, fun romp, and it's really great in that regard. It really does both styles pretty well, I think. But
yeah. So as far as Christmas goes, there's not a lot in here, but we do get the reinvention of Christmas in the Land of Ooo, and I guess the Finn and Jake ostensibly throw a Christmas party to watch these tapes, which is interesting because that's kind of the metric we always use for these stocking stuffers is, would you show this episode at a Christmas party?
I think I would. That's
kind of what they do in the episode.
It is what they do in the episode. But they watch a weird old man just kind of bloviate on
the
tape.
Video diary of a weird old man, and, like, you see him put on plays with Gunther, his penguin pal.
Exercising
and
interviewing captives
parties, and it's just, like, weird. Like, it's like watching anybody's weird old, like, video blog or video diary, and it's so innocent and pure.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of people that reveled in kind of the novelty of video, camcorders before the age of ubiquitous video camcorders and YouTube and everything like that.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was younger and when we had a camcorder, you'd put on plays and you'd make fake movies with your friends and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. It was.
Oh yeah.
You can do that now in this day and age, but it's so ubiquitous at this point. It doesn't feel nearly as special anymore. I don't know.
Exactly. Like when everybody can do it and anybody can see it, and also there's the factor of, we're all adults now. So there's the novelty of it has kind of worn off. Like, I don't know that I would do that. Do it. Yeah, I'm sure kids still do it with their phones, but they're all putting them on YouTube for the 6 viewers that they have,
And I think that, not to get too deep down this rabbit hole, but I feel like that robs it of some of it. Doesn't rob it. I'm not going to say it's better or worse, but it definitely has a different element to it when you know that it's being put out onto the internet and anybody can see it. There's a level of performance that's going on that you wouldn't necessarily have in like a home movie like that. Right?
Like, so you can't be as candid as you can when you're making the tape for yourself and nobody's watching.
Yeah,
you can be a little more candid and a little more open to being as ridiculous and silly as you want, and that's kind of what the Ice King does.
Yes, but
because he knows nobody's watching, because he eventually, then he buries the tape in a mountain of boogers. So I guess to sort of tie this back in with our previous episode, I want to talk about real quick how the difference between Doug and Adventure Time, these cartoons only were produced maybe 15 years apart, but they are worlds different. Like, the era in which these two were produced it's staggering. Like, I remember watching, one show as a kid and then watching this current show now and just seeing the two. I don't know, man. It's seeing the change of seeing the eras change by watching two cartoons, like one that I watched as a kid and one that I watched as an adult. It's kind of like it's whiplash almost. Like, what the heck? What happened to where we have shows like Adventure Time now, where we probably wouldn't have a show like this, 15, 20 years ago.
No, and you had good shows and you had weird shows. You had like your Ren and Stimpies and your Roccos and whatnot. But
yeah, I suppose. And it might be wrong to judge Doug against Adventure Time.
You know what it is. I can actually answer this question.
Okay.
The answer is one show, and that is SpongeBob SquarePants. That was such a paradigm shift as far as shows and the amount of success that show had just by reveling in like silliness. And I don't know. Doug obviously sometimes can be silly, but it was much more like even keeled, and even, I don't even want to say like up its own ass, but it tried to moralize a lot, whereas,
right, I mean, they're definitely trying to do different things.
They're absolutely trying to do different things. And I'm not trying to say whether it's better or worse, and obviously you had like Ren and Stimpy, which was incredibly stupid, but good. Because I mean,
split the difference there between like those and Rocko's Modern Life, where like it's still very kind of, it feels real in terms of like these are real situations in the real world that people deal with, but then they take it in a very cartoony direction and spin it in a way that is strange and absurd and entertaining.
Yes.
And then you kind of take one step further removed from that, where you have SpongeBob, which is
almost completely abstract. It's just...
Yes. I mean, there's still like the semblance of like a society in a real world where, SpongeBob has a job and he goes to work at the Krabby Patty and he does these things, but it's still very just ridiculous and silly. And then you take, okay, I'm agreeing with you basically. You take one more step into the abstract, where you have Adventure Time set in this post-apocalyptic era where, anthropomorphic candy walks around and these kids are having adventures with talking dogs, and it's just, I don't know. I'm not really saying that there's better or worse, or think cartoons have gotten better or anything like that, but it just makes me wonder how we got to the point where Adventure Time is this gigantic hit, where once, Doug was a show that ran for 8 seasons,
Yeah. Here's a question for you, and I hate to go back to Doug when we're talking about Adventure Time, but we're discussing both really. Do you think that if there was a Doug analog that came out now, it would succeed?
That it would or wouldn't succeed?
That it would. Do you think Doug could survive for 8 seasons on television in 2018?
Oh, absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
I mean, there are shows on Cartoon Network that are more like Doug, I guess, than Adventure Time. So I think Adventure Time made it okay for more like a wider variety of cartoons to exist out there.
I'm gonna stop you right there. What
Hang
show
on?
Okay, all right.
Hang on, I'm spitballing this out for myself because I'm not even sure how to answer the question.
Okay.
So I think like when Adventure Time started, if you had asked me that question, I would have said absolutely not, because this is what people want now, and that's not necessarily what people want anymore. But as Adventure Time has gone on and has sort of opened the door to more and varied, cartoon offerings on TV, there might be a place for a show like Doug now. I really just don't know.
I think Doug in its form in the 90s, where it was still very episodic, wouldn't succeed. But I think if they really leaned into it and made it, you have these shows like Adventure Time and Steven Universe that lean deeply into sort of like a narrative arc and character development and empathy and things like that, and sort of like the what's the word I'm looking for, the new
sincerity.
Yes, sort of lean into that new sincerity where it's like it's okay to have feelings. We're going to talk about these feelings and we're going to have some fun along the way. I don't know. It almost loops back around in that regard, I think. And you again, this episode sort of makes that shift between, yes, this is all silly and ridiculous and very cartoony, but also, we're going to explore these characters and they have feelings, they have inner lives just like anybody else. I don't know. And I almost feel like it loops back around in that regard, and maybe we will see something obviously not as bland and dull dishwater as Doug, but there might be some space for just a cartoon about some kid growing up somewhere and dealing with day-to-day kind of stuff. I don't know. And kind of lean into like Doug had dream sequences and stuff like that, and that's why it benefited being a cartoon rather than just a drama. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there will be something to that.
But isn't that kind of what that show Clarence is now? Like, it's still a little cartoony, but from what I've known, it's still like
about kids. I can't speak too much to it. I mean, there's always been a genre of cartoons where it's just cartoons for kids about kids.
Right.
I know there's like Clarence, and then I believe one that came out more recently is like Craig of the Creek, which is apparently very good. Mm-hmm. Which is about, I think, kids that they go on adventures. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, maybe that is. Maybe we're just old fogies who don't know anything, and maybe there is like a Doug analog out there.
I mean, that's realistically, that's probably the correct answer.
My only experience with Clarence is like a 3-minute clip that somebody showed me of it, or that somebody was talking about. So,
but yeah, I mean, so
all right.
I don't know. I'm also thinking about like right around the turn of the century, like 2000 or so, when you had all these adult-oriented cartoons on like prime time that were trying to capitalize on like the popularity of like Family Guy and stuff, where you had shows like The Oblongs and Mission Hill that just never found an audience and lasted maybe a season and then disappeared forever.
Yeah.
Like in today, like if you put those shows on TV today, they would run for 8 seasons.
Yeah, because Bob's Burgers is a great example of that. Bob's Burgers wouldn't have been able to survive in early aughts, I don't think.
Oh God, no. But like, or like The Critic. The Critic, if you put it out on TV now, it would be on its like 8th season or something like that.
Yeah,
like even that show lasted a couple of years, but nowadays, I think people are more open to that kind of cartoon than they were even 5 or 10 years ago. So yeah, there might be room for like a new version of Doug on TV. I just don't know. But the fact that Adventure Time kind of opened the door to what people were willing to accept out of like children's animation kind of leads me to believe that.
And I think it feeds back into it too a little bit. I think we've been talking mostly about kids' cartoons, but I don't think we can discount the influence that sort of adult or all audience cartoons have had on, when Doug came out, Simpsons had been around for a while, but there wasn't this explosion. Simpsons was really you had Simpsons and you had Beavis and Butthead, and those were kind of the two. They were still both exceptions to the rule.
Right.
Whereas in the early aughts, you had Family Guy, love it or lump it. It was a huge influence on. It created this boom of sort of Foxes and other networks. Sort of they began leaning in and realizing that these adult oriented cartoons were lucrative, and you could get talent to work on them and everything like that. And I think it probably. Those talent pools aren't mutually exclusive, and they probably kind of fed on one another and influenced one another more than we could probably imagine.
And neither of us are animators or animation experts, so we probably are not the people to be asking about these sort of shifts in TV dynamics and whatnot. But it's still, we can still reasonably speculate on this kind of stuff. So we're getting deep into TV theory right now, which I personally I'm all into. But I this is a Christmas podcast. We should be talking about Christmas and Adventure Time specifically. It's a tough question, but it's one that I think is interesting given the fact that we just watched back to back kind of. A Christmas show from '96 and then a Christmas show from 2011, and the difference between the two could not be, wider.
The world changed on 9/11. I mean, in all honesty, if we wanted to get academic term paper into the, master's thesis level into this, I'm sure we could tie 9/11 into it somehow. But anyways.
Okay, you know what? Fine, we're gonna do this.
All right.
I really, truly, legitimately believe that the glut of animation that we have right now, and sort of the tenor of cartoons as they exist from Adventure Time on, is very much a factor of the people, our generation growing up post 9/11, just wishing and hoping to exist in a world of pure silliness, because that's our only escape from the dire reality that awaits us outside.
I mean, I
since
think
2011.
You kind of hit the nail on the head. I think
that's exactly what it is.
Yes. Because who wants a hyper realistic or at least somewhat realistic cartoon about some kid? Because you had to, that's everyday life for a lot of people. You want to live in the land of Ooo.
Yeah, I don't want cartoons to reflect my reality, because my reality sucks right now. Yeah. And I would very much like to have adventures with a dog with stretchy arms and things like that. That's just, it's more appealing to not just our generation, but our generation and younger, kids. Our generation is now creating cartoons that are even sillier for the kids that are just coming up now, because we want kids to have the same kind of wacky cartoons that we're currently enjoying as well. And so it's just kind of a feedback loop that keeps producing sillier and sillier things. And you know what? That's fine. That's perfectly A-okay as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
We can talk all day about the implications of Adventure Time as sort of a text of post 9/11 America, but you know what? This is not the podcast for that.
I'm going to go out on a branch, and I'm going to give a hot take. And my hot take is that, by and large, and I obviously have not seen all cartoons before or after, I think cartoons are better now than they were when we were little, for the most part.
I tend to agree. The 80s cartoons that our generation grew up with, for the most part, were produced as sort of nascent toy commercials, like Ninja Turtles and Transformers. That's exactly what those are. But then you look at something like Adventure Time, which is just this pure creation of one person's wacko imagination. That's purely an expression of just absurdism. And sure, there are Adventure Time toys and action figures and things like that, but it's not the end result. It's a byproduct.
And caveat to what I just said, I am not including Looney Tunes, Merry Melodies, Cinema Short,
no
cartoons, golden age of cartoons before that. I'm basically taking anything from Scooby-Doo up until 9/11 as sort of my general swath. Cartoons made for television.
I really want to see Bradford's animation timeline where that literally goes from Scooby-Doo to 9/11.
Scooby-Doo to 9/11. A thesis. I will outline. No. But yeah, I'm glad that we're kindred spirits there. I think for the general part.
I agree. I agree.
part of it's me being jaded, but yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just being as toyetic as possible. And there are exceptions to the rule. There were great cartoons during that era, but I think by and large, I think cartoons are better now. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, the existence of channels like Cartoon Network and the existence of YouTube are a huge boon for animation like nerds like us, who all we want is to see something like fun and entertaining, and we're not necessarily out to be sold, the hot new toy anymore. I mean, we're grown up, we're adults now, so all I want is to see, like, I know I keep coming back to this on the show, but like Homestar Runner is just such a pure thing, and I love that it still exists.
Yes, it is. It is very pure, and the fact that it was outside of network television or any television for that matter, it was so.
Yeah, the AV Club, they used to do their series on TV shows that made it to 100 episodes. And they did one on Homestar Runner because it had like over 100 cartoons that they had produced.
Oh, so, yeah.
Like they treat Homestar Runner like any other TV show out there, and it really is. It exists kind of in its own little world, not that dissimilar from Adventure Time, to be honest.
Honestly, if we're talking about that, I've never really considered it like that before, but I think Homestar Runner is just like my favorite cartoon ever. It's just so good.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole thing from like I don't know what it is, but it's.
I think you and I hadn't even considered it as part of the media that we consume for this podcast, but I think you and I need to do a mini series on all of the Homestar Runner Decemberween cartoons.
That sounds like a great idea. Like we need to finish the King of the Hill first before we embark on that journey.
That's true. All right.
But yeah, it's like Homestar Runner, Adventure Time. These are the shows that are kind of, I guess, millennial touchstones, if we want to say that. And they're great. I don't know what else to say, but they're great.
Yeah.
And the difference between these two shows and a show like Doug is, I mean, we would be here all day explaining those differences. But yeah, like we didn't really say much about Christmas in this episode, but honestly, there's not a whole lot to it. Adventure Time basically reinvents Christmas for their post-apocalyptic timeline, and that's wonderful.
Sorry, go ahead.
I would totally put this on at a Christmas party, by the way. Like, that's our metric. I would do that.
I would too, and I think part of it is that Adventure Time doesn't have a lot to say about Christmas, and I think that's why there's only one Christmas episode, and I think that's good, and I can respect that. I have to wonder that when a show gets greenlit at Cartoon Network, if there's some sort of writer that says, like, okay, you have to do at least one Christmas episode, and this was their, like, attempt at that, but also trying to, like, wrap some interesting information about a character up into it, you know?
Right, yeah.
So
kind of pulling double duty, doing two things at once.
Yeah.
That's the power of a good TV show.
Yes. All right, I think that's going to do it.
Here on Stocking Stuffers, we do Christmas episodes of TV shows. So if there's any episodes out there you would like us to cover, we are definitely taking requests. So get those into us at Christmas Creeps on Twitter. Email us at xmascreeps@gmail.com. You go to facebook.com/Christmas Creeps and find us on there and leave us a comment. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more, and let us know how we're doing. That's going to do it for Christmas Creeps this week. So, till next week, I'm Joseph Wade.
I'm Bradford.
Wishing you all happy holidays. Good night.
Night.
Happy Christmas, you guys. Yeah.
And so it was decided that once every year when the weather got chilly, that Finn, Jake, the Ice King, BMO, Princess Bubblegum, Marceline the Vampire Queen, Cinnamon Bun, Peppermint Butler, Phil, a Candy Cane Man, one of the Gumdrop Girls, Lady Rainicorn, Lumpy Space Princess, that guy, the other guy, the pig, Tree Trunks, a two-headed duck, the old crazy tart toter, the Punch Bowl, a booger, and Gunter would get together while wearing really big sweaters and watch videos on the floor next to a fire to celebrate the day when Finn and Jake had a fleeting moment of empathy for the biggest weirdo in Ooo. It was a miracle. Good night.